You're listening to the Anthem Award-winning podcast from Rutgers Law School, The Power of Attorney. I'm your host and Dean of the Law School, Joanna Bond. I'm joined this morning by Megan Gorman. Megan is the founding partner of Chequers Financial Management, a San Francisco-based firm specializing in tax and financial planning for high net worth individuals. USA Today recognizes Chequers Financial Management as one of the top 500 registered investment advisor firms in the nation. This female-owned business serves a diverse client base, including entrepreneurs, corporate executives, and families with inherited wealth. Trained as an attorney at Rutgers Law School, Megan thrives on the challenges of navigating complex financial landscapes. Megan is also the author of a wonderful book called All the President's Money: How the Men Who Governed America Governed Their Money. It's a fascinating look at financial management among the presidents of the United States. So we'll get to that in just a minute. But Megan, I want to start with your origin story. Can you tell us a little bit about that?
Sure. So first of all, thank you for having me on. It's sort of, I'm a typical Jersey story, right? I grew up in South Jersey in Cape May, exit 0 on the Parkway. And I went to Bryn Mawr College for undergrad. I was a history major. And after college, I took a year off and taught English in China. And I wanted to go to law school. And I applied all over. And one of the schools that I applied to, but hadn't really thought seriously about, was Rutgers. And I was in China, and this is in the late 90s. So this is not the day and age of the technology we have today.
Right.
But, I'd gotten accepted a number of law schools. But Rutgers, they pursued me. And anyone who goes to Rutgers knows Dean Camille Andrews. I think Dean Andrews called me in China, which I still don't know how she pulled that off.
That's
But
great.
she wooed me to Rutgers, and I was really fortunate. I had a great experience at Rutgers. And at the time, and I don't know if this is the case today, I had to take tax to graduate. And, you get all these requirements and you're always like, oh, God, what do I got to take? So I go and I take tax. And it was with John Davies, who I think has retired. And it was like, boom, something clicked. I loved the puzzles of tax. All right. I still remember the Dubenstein case, which is the big case that you learn in tax law. And it led me to start taking all of the tax classes I could possibly take. So
Wow.
who would have thought? Like, if you had told me
That's
tax, I was like,
fantastic.
no.
Right.
So, what ends up happening, and like a lot of law students can appreciate this, is I'm class of 2002, and I am looking for a job in 2001 during a recession, which is never a good time to be looking for a job.
No.
And in the middle of this recession, I was interviewing with a bunch of firms, one of being a firm called Arthur Andersen. And in the middle of my interview process, which I wanted to work at Arthur Andersen, they went bankrupt and imploded.
Oh,
So
no.
it was a really dramatic entry into the workforce. But I got recruited by a division of Goldman Sachs called ACO. And I worked there for 12 years. I worked with corporate CEOs and other C-suite executives on everything financial, from tax planning and preparation, investments, estate planning, cash flow. Executive compensation, you name it, I was doing it. And I then briefly went to Bank of New York Mellon. And in the meantime, by the way, they moved me to California. And
Okay.
10 years ago, in March, I started my own firm in San Francisco. And so I continue to work with clients holistically. I don't practice law. I'm one of those non-practicing attorneys, but everything I do relies on my legal background, the issue spotting, the ability to know what needs to get done, how do you protect people, and obviously
Right.
how to grow wealth. And so that's a little bit of my story and how Rutgers plays into it. So, you never know what you have to take in law school, how it will impact your career.
Right. Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. I love that you took that first tax class and realized that was something energizing for you. That's wonderful. And let me return to law school for a
Mhm.
moment. When you think back to your Rutgers Law School days, what is one of the most important things you learned in law school?
Oh gosh. I think law school gave me confidence in my intellectual ability. And so I would say, and I give a lot of credit to that. I had the chance to work closely. He just recently retired, but I worked closely with distinguished Professor Jay Feynman. And Jay, as anyone knows, I mean, he's brilliant, right? And
Right.
he is intellectually, he challenges you.
Yeah,
And the
absolutely.
fact that I had someone like that challenging me over the course of my law school career really made an impact um, on me in how I, looked at the world, looked at the law, looked at how you could use your degree. And it's really nice because it's come full circle because I helped Jay with one of his books, not the insurance one. I think it was called Law
Okay.
101,
Okay.
but coming full circle, when my book was coming out, I sent Jay a copy. So I
Oh,
feel
that's
like,
great.
okay, thank you, Professor Feynman, for all the help you gave me over the years.
Right. Oh, that's wonderful. And I think I know the answer to this, but I'm going to ask the question anyway. What was your most favorite class in law school? That's the one I think I know the answer to.
Mhm.
And what was your least favorite class in law school?
So I had a really bad time in Civ Pro. That darn international shoe. I don't even know. I
International
still don't even know the
shoe.
cases. And it was a learning experience for me because I'll just give you a quick story about it. Civ Pro is difficult in the best of times. And we took our exams and I did not get a good grade in that class. I think I would have had all A's or, I was doing really well in the
Right.
other classes. And then I went and sat down with the professor and I found out that there was an issue where they missed a couple of my answers. So I probably should have had a higher grade.
Oh,
And this is in
wow.
retrospect, I wish I had advocated for myself more.
Right.
I wish I
Right.
hadn't been afraid to say, hey, if you misgraded this, then you should really relook at my grade.
Right.
That was my hardest class. I think my favorite class, I actually loved estate and gift tax. So I don't know if that was what you were going to think, but like I did take
I knew
estate
it
and
was a
gift.
tax
And
class.
I'm blanking on the professor's name. She was phenomenal. She was from the Caribbean. I mean, she was a whiz in gift tax, and
Oh,
she
that's
made
great.
it so much fun to talk about gifting. And
Right.
as the world comes full circle because I learned about things like the Gallo Amendment in estate and gift tax, which happened in the 70s. And I actually ended up marrying someone who worked with the Gallows. So
Oh, you're
everything,
kidding.
I've actually met the Gallows and I'm like, I've read the case. So, yeah.
That's great. That's really gratifying.
Yeah.
Oh, and so tell me, how did Rutgers Law School help to prepare you for your career? And you've had such a fascinating career that's taken a few twists and turns. So what do you think it was about your law school experience that really helped prepare you for that career?
Yeah. I mean, look, I think that law school taught me how to think a certain way and how to not be afraid to use that way of thinking to problem solve. But one of the other things, and it was funny when I was writing my book, and in the book, I taught what we can talk about in a moment, but I talk about different ways of building wealth. And I did a lot of research on education and on what's called the net worth premium. So back in the day when I was in school, you went to college and law school for a better salary, right? That was always the mentality. And in the day and age of student loans, we're really now supposed to look at it as the net worth premium, which is you go to college, you go to law school. How do you build your net worth by not
Hmm.
taking on as much in debt? And I bring this up because when I was trying to figure out where to go, and I had Camille Andrews calling me in China, and I was looking at a variety of law schools. One of the things that really struck me with Rutgers was it was a top tier education at a very reasonable price. And in fact, today I
Right.
would tell you it was a screaming deal because when I went to Rutgers, it was 10 grand a year. And so I
Amazing.
bring this up because I know law students, when you're out there and you're trying to figure out, are you making the right decisions, right? Do you take the loan to do the Barbary class? Do you take student loans to help with your law degree? You really need to be thinking about, okay, what is the career path you're going to go on post law school? And will you be able to afford to manage the debt? And I was very fortunate, the Rutgers debt wasn't incredibly, it wasn't that it was, look, it's debt, but it was manageable. And so I'm very appreciative that Rutgers was priced a certain way so that when I got out, I could make other decisions about life that could help me on my financial path.
That's so incredible. And kudos to you that you were that financially savvy at that young age. I wish I could say the same.
Yeah, I don't know
But
if I
it
was
does
that
make a
savvy, but
difference.
you figure out. I knew one thing. Don't laugh. But in law school, all my classmates wanted to do like public interest law, and
Right.
I was always very clear, like I'm here for the money. So that might be why I ended up in tax, right? I
Right.
mean, there's no, and
Right.
public interest law. That's a wonderful area of the law. But
Right.
I'm a Taurus. I've always been very focused on the financial. So
Right.
I think that just naturally played to me.
That's great. That's great. Well, so tell me what happened after law school?
So, after law school, I wasn't it was a really hard shift because you spend 3 years in law school talking about practicing law. You take the bar to practice law. And
Right.
then I got out and took a job that I didn't practice law, right? And that's a real head switch. But when I was looking at jobs and career paths, one of the reasons I was so drawn to the PwC's, Arthur Anderson's, ACOs of the world was I wanted to master money and I wanted to be in charge of my own destiny. And I didn't know a lot about investing. I didn't know a lot about tax planning. Had studied it from an academic standpoint, but studying it and actually doing it is a very different thing. And so the thing that clicked for me early on, and I learned in my career, is my special skill set is I'm a good kidney. Now, what I mean by that is I can talk to the tax and the investment quants and, speak that language. And then I can sit in front of the client and I can make these concepts, that is really like speaking a different language, be much
Right.
more palatable and easier to understand so that people are focusing on making decisions versus trying to be like, wait, why do I care about alpha in a portfolio? What is standard deviation? So
Right.
I learned early on being a good kidney was something that was really, really important. And being with the client, engaging with the client, advocating for the client is what I love best in what I do. And it's
Right.
it's fun.
That's such a great analogy. I love that. But I think those same qualities make you a really good author, and your ability to sort of tell a story that is really grounded in financial principles in a way that people can understand is phenomenal.
Yeah. Well,
Um,
I'm a lover of history, right?
right,
And the
right.
law is so much history, right? I mean, I've even named my firm after a building in England, Chequers, which
Oh, that's
passed
great.
over 800 years of estate planning, right? Of wealth
Wow.
transfer. So if you think about it, like the things you do in law school, you're dealing in such deep-rooted traditions, both in the United States and in the UK. Yeah, I feel like history is so important to understand.
Absolutely. Can you tell us a little bit about your current role and what it entails as a founder and managing partner at Checkers
Yes.
Financial Management?
Yeah. So, I am in this sort of interesting intersection of finance. So, I work with high net worth and ultra high net worth individuals. And I say I'm at this intersection because um, I work with clients. Usually my clients have taxable estates. So, really anything north of 30 to 40 million is usually from there. And I manage them and all of their finances. I run like a multifamily office. So I'm doing their tax planning and preparation. I'm running their investments. I'm managing cash flow. I come up with the estate strategy. I do not draft, but I work with outside attorneys
Okay.
and work a lot with moving assets outside the estate, depending on the tax law. And then my other specialization is in things like stock options, restricted stock, deferred comp. So
Sure.
all of this ties together. And so when I work with these families, I'm like a one-stop shop. So I deal with a lot of our clients of the firm. I also have partners that have clients, and then I do run the firm. There's 18 of us today. We're in the middle of hiring. And so we've been growing steadily over 10 years. So it's
Hmm.
sort of a balance of both of those jobs. And then
Right.
just to make it even more fun, probably, I don't know, 6, 7 years ago, I got into writing and I started writing for Forbes. And ultimately, that culminated in me deciding to write a book.
That's wonderful. That's fantastic. Well, I do want to get into the book in just a moment, but let me ask you, while we're on the subject
Mhm.
of your day-to-day life, what's your favorite part of your current role?
I mean, the thing I love the most is just working with the client, right? And I do a lot of my meetings in person with the client. So I've worked with people now over 20 years. So I know them, I know their children, I know their parents, I know their siblings. I know the whole sort of ecosystem around them. And so the
Hmm.
client meetings are interesting. And I often tell my team, because my team will send me in all prepared with all these analysis, my best work is thinking on my feet with the client, which
Right.
is, we're talking about something, we're kicking the can around, and then boom, we find an idea that just sort of propels everybody forward. So that's the part that I like the most. And I also like building my team. I have
Hmm.
really fortunate. I have very, very smart people who work with me, very, very ambitious people. And it's fun to work with them and
Absolutely.
watch them
That's great.
grow. Yeah.
Sure. Well, Megan, you mentioned your book earlier, and I want to get to the book. It's fascinating to me. So, can you tell me a little bit about how you got the idea and what motivated you to write the book?
Yeah. So first of all, I mean, I've always loved studying the presidents. I'm from a small town. And if you look at a lot of our presidents, a lot of them grew up in small towns. So I think I always related to that aspect of these people who were young in small towns who go out in the world and make their way. But, in doing what I do, I work with very wealthy people. And, when you listen to celebrities and you see people the divorcing in celebrity world, you start to, as a numbers person, you start to think about, well, how did they make that decision? How did they do that? And so I had wanted to do something with writing with the presidents. And I went in 2017 to Springfield, Illinois to visit the Lincoln Library. And when you go to Springfield, you first go to New Salem. And New Salem's a town like 10, 15 miles away, but it's where Lincoln was in his early 20s, where he had a log cabin, he had a store, he was the postmaster. And you go to New Salem and you look around, you're like, oh, wow, okay, like this is a log cabin. Like this is
Right.
rustic living from the 1830s.
Right.
And then you go to Springfield and they take you to his house, which is on the corner of 8th and Jackson Street. And it's the best house in town. And
Hmm.
then you realize he left New Salem in 1837. He got to Springfield and then by 1844, he owned the best house in town. And I thought, how
Right.
did he do that? Because
There's a
that took
story
work.
there.
There's a story there,
Absolutely.
right? And I noticed that in history books, right? You'd hear about like this president went to school, they bought a car, and you wonder, okay, these financial issues, we realize when we live them are incredibly stressful. Buying a house, deciding where to go to school, and so it took 4.5 years to write the book because I think that if you're going to write history and really have something to say, you want to make it interesting, right?
Right.
You want it to be a mix of highbrow, right? The research, the quality of the
Sure.
stories, but it's a little bit of pop culture, right? You want it to be fun and interesting and have people walk away with a couple of nuggets that they can tell at cocktail parties. So
Right.
it took me a long time to figure out how to sculpt the book. But basically, what I did is each of the chapters is a trait I see in my clients, right? The ability to take risk, their education, right? Or lack of a formal education, the ability to budget, who you marry, how much does luck play into it?
Hmm.
And each chapter, I talk about some of the more academic principles of this, but tell you stories of presidents and not in a chronological order. Because one of the things that I found in studying this was that regardless of the time period, if we were sitting in the 1750s with George Washington, the 1850s, Abraham Lincoln, the 1950s with Dwight Eisenhower, even today, all the same financial issues are there.
Right.
And all of us are going through the same financial anxiety and stress and decision making. It's just the time period we're living in. And so I wanted to take the reader on a journey where I wasn't like, hey, this is George Washington, he's the first, but more, hey, let's look at all of them and let's see
Right.
who succeeded. And at times, more importantly, let's see who failed. Because we also have a misconception about people that when they're successful in one area of their life, that everything is puppies and kittens and rainbows and unicorns. And as
Right.
Thomas Jefferson would tell you, that's not always the case.
Not always true. Right. Right.
Exactly.
Well, that is fantastic. And so I want to also ask, have you received any feedback about the book from any of the living presidents or anyone mentioned in the book?
No, no, it's funny. So the book also, I do mention client stories. They're not, they're not true stories of clients. They're versions of client situations I've dealt with. What has been really, and I haven't talked to any of the presidents, and I didn't want to because remember, your own, they'll have a spin on their own story. But
Hmm.
what I thought was really striking is I got a lot of outreach from my clients who were CEOs, CFOs, really, really successful, high powered people. And the notes all had a very similar tone to them, which was I always thought I was successful and had wealth because I worked hard and was lucky. I didn't think about all of the other little decisions I made along the way.
Right.
And I thought that was really interesting, right? That the two qualities people pick up the most is luck and working hard.
And hard work. Right.
Right, right. And there's truth to that, right? I mean, both of those things are true. But, I'll give you an example. One of the most important decisions you make besides what you do is who you marry or who you partner with, right? And so, you look at certain presidents out there and their spouses are instrumental to their success. I mean, talking
Right.
about a modern president, right? Let's take Barack Obama. He's a dreamer, a visionary. But if you look at Michelle Obama, and just as educated as he is, but
Right.
in money, she's very grounded.
Hmm.
She talks about it in her book. Like Barack, thinks he could just go design a money tree. Like he just dreams these things. And I love this idea of the two of them, right? Her very grounded, her keeping them on the steady path, and him pushing them ahead with this vision. And so that's
Right.
why who you marry is so important. And by
Right.
the way, a lot of our presidents married up. Washington, Lincoln, Eisenhower, so
Fascinating.
marrying a woman for her money is also a way to build wealth amongst the presidents. So ladies, take note.
Right. And you also wrote that the best thing someone can do financially is to get married and stay married. Why is
Yes.
that?
Because divorce is incredibly
It's
expensive.
expensive,
It
right?
is, it is. And we live in a system today where divorce, you're not always it's not an easy system to get through and it's just money and emotion are hard together. Right?
Right.
So, who you marry and trying to stay married is really, really important if you are going to try to build wealth. And I can't tell you how many times over the course of my career, I will get a client who is like, look, I need help because I just got divorced and I lost half of my assets and now I need to catch up. And so
Right.
that's a hard thing because, we live in a day and age where jobs are, especially these big jobs, you could get laid off at any time. People think
Right.
being a CEO is very sexy. It is, but remember, they pay you to go away when they don't want you there.
Right.
And so you're trying to take advantage of a finite period of time where the income is incredibly high.
Hmm. No, that makes sense. That completely makes sense. And I know that you did a ton of research for this book. What surprised you the most? Was there anything shocking that you found in the research for the book?
You know, I get asked this a lot, and I think what I found surprising or it was really lovely was I found that through the research, through primary source documents like letters and telegrams, was that they were just very real people and very normal, very much like us, and their personalities come through. So, for
Mhm.
instance, when I was working with the FDR library, you go to these archives and you have to tell them what boxes you want. And, I'm looking for very obscure things, right? I'm not there looking for Social Security or World War II. I
Right.
went into the FDR library and I'm like, I'm here for the lobsters. And if you read the book, you'll know what I'm talking about. So, what was funny is I got to go through his tax returns, which he did by hand for a long time. So you're
Amazing.
looking at the pencil calculations by FDR. And I found in there a letter in 1926 from the Treasury to FDR saying, sir, you forgot to file your tax return for this year. And you
Oops.
get back a breezy reply from FDR, which is very FDR-esque, very charismatic, like, oh, I was traveling from Warm Springs to New York and somehow I lost the files. My brother died. I'll get it to you soon. And you read it and you're like, I can totally see him with this, the cigarette
Right.
holder and the
Right.
pince nez just sort of being charming, in a probably a car going up the coast. But it was very just you just got a sense of him and a sense of just who the person was. And then also, wait a minute, is this how the IRS worked in the 20s? Like,
Right.
they're never that nice now. You just get the letter.
Right, right.
So it's sort of funny how it just I feel like I found them as people in the archives.
That's so interesting that you get these little glimpses into their lives and their personalities through the research that you did. That must have been so gratifying.
Yeah, yeah, and I got to see like I have Herbert Hoover's power of attorney, right? And you
Right.
see these documents that, we all have today and you realize that they had them just as well and, some of them were better at navigating than others.
Right. And you wrote at the end of the book that the American dream may not be possible for a lot of Americans, like it was for most of the presidents, due to growing inflation, for example, and other factors. Can you elaborate a little bit on why financial literacy is so important?
Yeah, I mean, so, when you think about the stories of the presidents in the past, a lot of their same issues are the same that we had today. But they also had a better ability to fail and pivot. So, what do I mean by that? When you look at Abraham Lincoln, when he got to New Salem, he opened a store. He had no business opening a store, but he took on a loan to do it. He took on a business partner who was an alcoholic. And then they proceeded to run up debt, buying inventory on cheap money. They bought another store on credit. And they eventually go out of business. And then his business partner conveniently dies and Lincoln assumes his business partner's debt. And the debt all in was $1,100, which
Right.
doesn't sound like much today, but it was about $40,000 in our money. And he was a funny guy, Lincoln. He would call it his national debt. And he does pay off his national debt. But if you think about that, he had a chance to fail and pivot. And
Hmm.
today, would that be the case? Would someone be able to make these financial mistakes and pivot as fast? And think about it, $40,000 in, today, that's like a year of college, right?
Right.
So someone taking on that debt today is limiting their opportunity set. So what I found is that the American dream is still alive and it's still obtainable. It's just harder than ever. And I want people to understand, we're in this situation where the economy has been strong but we are in an affordability crisis and everything is so much more expensive than it's ever been. And we have institutions that are not being as nimble as they once were. So, what do I mean by that? Like, okay, why do you need 20% to buy a house? 20% down, right? It's a rule from the
Right.
50s. It's a rule from the 50s. It's a banking rule. It's an irrelevant rule today. And yet we still comply with it. And so you have millions of Americans who can't get into the housing market because they don't have the down
They
payment.
don't have that 20% down. Right.
Right. So they're and the house, if you think about American history and the house over the course of American history, from Jefferson to Lincoln to FDR and all the legislation signed in, having a house was the one way you built wealth.
Right.
So again, it's hard to be as nimble as they were in the past because we just don't have the ability to fail and continue to pivot and move on. So that's the
Right.
frustrating thing.
Right.
Do I think things are changeable? Yes, I think having financial literacy, to the second part of your question, is incredibly important. Back in the day, when I went to high school, I learned how to balance a checkbook and I played the stock market game. And the stock market game is a lot of fun, but it teaches you all the wrong things about money because money is a long, slow wait, and it's not.
Hmm.
You got to make money by the end of the semester.
Right.
And so, financial literacy, and I'm on the board of the National Endowment for Financial Education. We only have financial literacy programs in 23 states. And that's been a big progress because if we had, I think that's double what we were in 2020 when the pandemic started. So we need to have better financial literacy in schools to get everybody ready, but to
Hmm.
realize that financial literacy doesn't end just because you finish school, but that it continues to go. So, like in law school, and I don't know if this is what they have now, you're never really taught how to run a business. Right?
Right.
And how
Right.
many people you go to law school with? A lot of people do take the big jobs or they're big firms or mid-sized firms, but I also have a lot of classmates that have their own shop.
Hmm.
And did anyone teach us how to do P&Ls? Or how to
No.
manage the money or or how to send a wire, right? And
Right.
attorneys send wires a lot because of your attorney trust accounts. So,
Right.
you realize that there's this gap in our collective education and it's okay to feel frustrated. Like I think we all feel that everybody else got the education and we didn't get it taught. And it feels frustrating. So this
Yeah.
is, something that I think as we progress forward we should continue to talk about as a country.
I realize that it's improving, but I'm surprised that the rate of the percentage of states who actually teach this in the curriculum, and maybe it's the K-12 curriculum, but that's still surprisingly low because it's so important.
It is. And what the challenge is, right, is everybody comes with a money story of their own, right? Money's emotion, it's your own life experiences. So to have the right financial education, it's not the state agreeing to put it in. It's the state agreeing to put it in and funding it, because you
Right.
have to educate the teachers, because, we could be sitting in, I don't know, Demarest or Alpine, New Jersey, where there is great wealth. And so everybody teaching comes with a more moneyed experience. But then in a lower income area, you don't want, the teachers there might not have the experience to teach, and they need to learn in order to teach to the students. So
Right.
having funding for teachers is key for the success for financial literacy.
Yeah, that makes complete sense to me. And what do you think is the biggest mistake the average person makes when it comes to their finances?
Well, first of all, I think what you do and who you marry is the first threshold
Right.
of
Right.
success. But here's the thing, and I talk about it in the book. When you look at the presidents who were not successful with their money, Thomas Jefferson, James Madison, James Monroe, the Troika, who are brilliant people, they, morally were a little struggling because of the slavery issue. But why did they not succeed financially? Because they had a lot of illiquid assets. And instead of engaging, they stuck their head in the sand. They didn't do the tough work they had to do in deciding, hey, maybe I should sell some land to have some liquidity. And you see that as a contrast because their peer, George Washington, who incidentally didn't go to college, and the three of them did. Washington, if you ever get a chance to look at Washington's correspondence, one, he's an amazing budgeter. Two, his letters are filled with financial transactions. He's selling a little strip of land to get liquidity. He, is got some stock. He needs to sell it. He was very charitable also in promoting education. So there's a choice to be proactively engaged with your money. And so I would tell anyone listening, especially if you're a young law school student or about to graduate, get proactive with this stuff right out of the gate, so it becomes a habit that you're dealing with your financial problems right out of the gate.
Right. I think that the point about making it a habit is also really important because then it just becomes something that you do on a daily or weekly basis and you make your monthly budget or whatever it is.
Exactly.
And it's a
Exactly.
habit.
Yeah. And I think, especially for anyone who is in law school coming out, we're coming out with student loans. Like, people are always shocked when I tell them I still have student loans. Now, I'm the generation that came out where we refinanced them at like 3.5%. So I can
Right.
make more money in the S&P 500, right?
Right.
But again, you have to be strategic about this decision making, right? And so I made a strategic decision. So people are always shocked that I have student loans, but I'm like, no, 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 it's well thought out,
Right.
right?
It's part of the
If
plan.
you're graduating today, you're probably at 6, 7%.
Right.
So your hustle has got to be pay down the loans, pay down the loans, pay down the loans.
Right.
And I think reading a lot can also give you insight, just in terms of how others did it. And
Right.
one book that always comes to mind is, I always think of the book Shoe Dog. I don't know if you read that, but it's about the
No.
making of Nike. And, this was a story. I mean, now that Nike's an incredible successful company, but at the time they were, they literally would list out who was the top person they were going to pay down, because again, they were trying to survive. And that's the thing to keep in mind when you're just starting out and you've got loans, is prioritize your order of payees.
Right. I still remember the day that I paid off all of my student loans,
Is that
and
that must be a
it
good
was
day.
yes, yes, it was a great day. I remember celebrating, but it was a long time coming.
Yes. Yeah. Yeah. I mean, mine are coming up soon and I only have a little bit left, but
Right.
it's, that and paying off mortgages. I wish we celebrated those two things more, right?
Right.
Which is, oh, you actually own your house outright. And people are always shocked
Yeah.
when I say this, but I'm like, even if you have a mortgage, like, I get the leverage question, but since the Tax Cuts and Jobs Act of 2017, 90% of all Americans take the standard deduction. So you're not getting any bang for your buck with your mortgage. So if you can pay it
Right.
off, pay it off.
Do it. Right.
Exactly.
Right. Well, let me ask you, what advice would you give to prospective law students who are aspiring to pursue a career in finance or financial management?
Yeah, yeah. So first of all, I mean, I think don't be afraid. I'll say this to all law students. Don't be afraid to take classes like tax, right? Everybody should be taking those classes. But, I think the non-traditional path is actually become a lot less, lot more common today, right? Than it
Mhm.
was 20 years ago when I was coming out of law school. And what I would tell people is don't be afraid to come out of law school and have different experiences with your career. I would make the argument you really don't need to get like serious until, you're in your like mid 30s. But if you want to get out and do a round of investment banking or go work in asset management or, in investment management or do these different financial areas, go for it because careers are so long now, right? I mean, I'm in year 23 of my career and, now I'm a writer, right? I never would have foreseen that when I was at Rutgers. But your career is really a collection of all the experiences. And it takes 20 years really to understand everything you've learned over the course of your career. And careers go up and down, and you go through periods of time where everything's great and periods of time where everything's tough. And so
Right.
that's why having a different set of experiences to rely on can make you more unique in the workplace.
Such great advice. I completely agree. And is there anything finally that you would like to add that we haven't covered?
No, I mean, I think the thing I would just tell you is, careers are long and varied, right? And there are skills you learn in law school that you don't realize you will need at later points in time. And one of those skills I would tell you is writing. So I know everybody's take legal research and writing. You write your memo, you write your brief. I'm assuming that's still how it works, right?
It is,
And,
absolutely.
I will tell you the people who are able to write, it is a very, very nuanced skill set. You don't hire someone just for the writing, but when someone can write, it is a really big plus in growing your career. So focus on those types of classes just as much as contracts and property and all that fun stuff and torts.
Right.
But the writing classes are really, really important. And you learn as an attorney or law student how to write a certain way. And that way of writing is very clear and very concise. And that's a good thing because a lot of people are not good writers and they're not clear writers. So
It's
that would be
such a
the piece of
great,
advice.
yeah, absolutely. It's such a great transferable skill. And clearly you've taken that to heart in writing this book. It's a wonderful book and I recommend it to everyone. And Megan, I just want to say thank you so much for joining us today. This was a fascinating conversation and I really appreciate you taking the time.
Yeah, no, thank you for having me on. And yeah, everybody check out the book. We're on Amazon and anywhere else you buy books. So thank you.
Thank you. The Power of Attorney is a production of Rutgers Law School. With 2 locations just minutes from New York City and Philadelphia, Rutgers Law offers the prestige and reputation of a large, nationally known university with a personal, small campus experience. Learn more today by visiting us at law.rutgers.edu.